Hello everyone. For those who doesn't know me, I just started, as Bill mentioned, 1.5 years ago in Vernon James Center as a soil management extension specialist. So for those who knows Carl Crozier, I took his position. And a little bit different than what he has been doing, is more related to what, for those who knows George Netherman, is more related to what George was doing here. So we mainly focus on tillage and cover crop management for soil health and for soil organic matter accumulation. And today I will try to be covering them and have some experience around here we did this year and some ongoing research. We'll try to dig into that a little bit. And today's I will be also mentioning some of the amendments practices that we are using and how to incorporate that in. So I thought for this kind of presentation it would be good to get to know soils a little bit, because it might be a little different than what we understand from the soils. So for the ideal condition, we expect soil to have 50% dry material and 50% water and air in the soil. Because those roots we have in the soils, they need water, but they also need air space to get breathing. So in, again, ideal conditions, we expect soils to have about 45% of the minerals, what we call sand, silt, and clay, and about the 5% of organic matter, which I wish we have 5% in coastal plain, right? But this is, again, ideal conditions. But these numbers can, of course, be different depending on the factors we have. And we categorize all the factors impact the soil's development in 5 different categories. First is parent material, what we already have there, that we need to work with that material. Second is climate, so anything we do in our management has to be adapted to climate we have, so we need to get to know our climate and what that does for our soils. Topography and time, so everything needs time. I leave this one at the end because we are part of these animals, right? And we have plants, and whatever we do as a management in our soils, we are part of this category that we impact the soils. And all these factors are developing different layer of the soils, has their own characteristics, and we try to improve the health of this profile, what we call this is a soil profile from top to bottom. And we try to improve the quality of this profile to have more productive soils and greater yields. So when we dig into what we have there, that's what soil scientists do and trying to deliver that. We have different size of the particles, we probably are familiar with that, but we also have different shapes and size of the structures in the soils. So when we call the soil structure, we are basically talking about these guys. And they get formed, these particles get together, crop residue or animal residue get there, microbes, and everything you can think of in soils, they all work together to develop these guys. And inside these, we have different size of the pores, animals, microbes, any living organisms, basically anything inside the soil living there, providing the productivity in our field. So when we think about all this together, of course we expect soils to be different color, different shape, different structure, different stability, and also different pore space. So if you can look into these slides overly, you can see there are physical perspective of it, there are chemical properties there, there are also organisms or microbes in the soil. So soil is not only physical, only chemical, only biological. So when we define how well our soil is doing for productivity, we need to talk about the functionality of that soil, which covers the physical, chemical, and biological perspective. That's what we call soil health. So when we look into different soils, these are all from coastal plain, except this guy is from tidewater region. And we have different profiles, different layers, different depth, and different nutrients or elements inside there. And this is important because when we look into our soil health, we are basically trying to understand how well that soil is supporting the crop yield, adaptation to climate, how resilient our soils are for the pest or for the disease or for any climatic activities we have. And also, we want to look into how stable or sustainable to do that agricultural activity. And then I just put these words right here on top, diverse soils and climate. This is the nature of the North Carolina. I had never seen this much diversity anywhere else. 12 soil types in one field. That was the highest number I have ever seen. So we have different type of soils. Some of them are really sensitive to erosion, have high risk of erosion. Some of them are sensitive to climate variability. Some of them are deficient in nutrients, like we know if we convert anything from the forest, we have to support the fertility and add lime to get a good productivity there. Some of them have water management issues, and some of them are not sustainably being managed over the time. And with these much challenges, but we have the good things too. We can bring some management practices that could be our opportunity, bringing more diversity in cropping systems, bringing in the climate-adapted cover crops, changing our tillage management to more conservative and adapting the varieties and having more precision in our agricultural activities there. So when we think about the incorporating soil amendments, we can see there are a lot of different categories they can help us, and we use them for different purposes. But we add lime to increase the pH, or we do add some organic materials to support the soil's organic matter, right? And we put cover crop there or leave more residue on the surface, try to have the surface coverage and surface support against erosion. So everything has a purpose. And when we think about these amendments, we have different categories for that too. So we have organic amendments, some of the inorganics we are familiar, and we also have cover crops that are more economical way of accumulating organic matter. You probably also all know all these things around here is going on. But we have some new technologies or new development they get in agriculture, like biochar, which is basically about 70-80% carbon containing material that we can add into the field, which has great pore space. We will have a little discussion about these in coming slides. So to apply this amendment in the field, we want to look into soil testing first. And we have much bigger capacity of soil testing now because of technological improvement, because of the new knowledge, and we can look into soils in many different direction, perspective, and dimension. We can do analysis in the field. We can do our general analysis that we get used to it in the lab, but we can use technology to look in a size that we cannot see with our eyes. For example, these two pictures, there is no way we can see this image by our eyes. We have to use some sort of equipment. We can even look into 3D distributions or three-dimension distribution of the pores, their sizes, and how much we have there, and trying to understand, developing that and having more and more of that, what it's doing for us. Basically, we are going to be able to store more nutrients. We are going to be able to store more water if we have more of these pores. But which one? Is bigger pores or smaller pores? So we can even test that right now. And we can also develop some maps to answer the challenge of diversity in our soils. Because even in the same field, we can have quite different soils in each corner. So the first thing I want to talk is tillage. I just put 4 or 5 of them here. You can add ripping, you can have chisel, disking, bedding cover crops. All those things can be part of it, but everything has a pros and cons, right? So if we go with a conventional tillage system, or if we do any tillage which doesn't fit the soil type we have in our field, we will cause some damage. We'll either have, for example, subsurface compaction, or we may have surface crusting or weak soil structure with the weak roots, or we may have soil physical issues. Like in this field, in the first look, without knowing anything, the direction of the tillage and planting is an invitation, is a ticket for erosion. It says, please do so. So it's literally you are asking for erosion to happen. So doing this in a right way, in a right intensity is very important for specific soil type. So when we are doing the tillage, not only, we call minimum tillage or reduced tillage or anything, but those are very general terms, is no longer the topics. The topics now is what equipment you are using, how heavy it is, how deep you are going, and how fast you are going when you do those activities. And we'll try to answer those if possible. So these are some pictures here, and I want to mention a detail here. So let's say we are using a ripper or we are using a strip tiller or chisel, and it's important what type of tillage we are doing, what equipment we are using, but it's also important what points and shanks we are using, because those are also increasing the intensity of the disturbance in the soils. Yes, you can use the chisel tail, but depending on what chisel or shank and points you are using, intensity can go really high, or it can just be little scratch in the soil, and depth and the speed. So here we have an example of a conventional till and no-till. So this is, when we look into this no-till and this no-till comparison, we can even see we have some issues in no-till too, because of the soil type is not appropriate for that tillage. That's what I was trying to talk about. Yes, when we have a conventional, we will have weaker soil structure, we will have weaker roots, and when we dig in a pit or open it the surface, we'll see they are just falling apart. It's because of the conventional tillage. And no-till is staying more together, aggregated, but difference between this no-till, like we can see here, the roots are certainly cut in a lane, because we have a hard pan development, such a high organic matter soil in tidewater region. Why do we have hard pan? We're supposed to not have it there. So if we have a hard pan in the clay layer, that is usually because of the field traffic, the equipment weight, how heavy is our equipment and how many times we are getting into the field. But if we have this compacted layer in sandy layer, much closer to the surface, that is usually related to soil management practice we are doing, generally related to tillage type. So it is important to know the soils before we decide what kind of tillage we need to do there. So here are some of the data we got from the coastal plain. These are, as you can see, compaction, infiltration, nutrient availability, erosion, temperature, moisture. They are all different properties, but they are all showing the same thing. So let's look at the compaction a little bit. So we have 40-year, longer than 40-year no-till, 25-year no-till, recently moving to no-till, vertical till, strip till, and also comparing them with forest and pasture, trying to see if our field activity is doing difference. So from top to down, every 5 centimeters indicates 2 inches. So this is from 2 inches. We have one box with these rows representing the 2 inches, and each column is representing one field. And once it gets darker, means in more compacted. So we can see on the surface, we usually have lighter colors, means no compaction. And when we move into the same depth, generally most soils have compactions. And this is because of the field traffic. And if you see any movement up, let's say this one is having more, these two having more compaction close to the surface, that is usually generally because of the management we have in the field. So same thing here. We use a colored liquid to look into how deep water is infiltrating. And you can see 3 white dots here and 3 white dots here. That's how deep is in no-till and in conventional till. So having more conservative tillage is definitely improving the soil physical properties, but does no-till work for everywhere? Generally, yes, but not everywhere. So we need to be careful what we are choosing. And if you are already doing the conventional tillage and you want to shift into no-till right away, that may not be perfect choice. So we're going to think about that. So same thing with nutrients. We have seen more phosphorus and zinc in more intense tillage practices, and same thing with erosion. This is exactly what we are talking. When you do tillage in the field, you are basically disturbing the soils. You are breaking those aggregates in part. So let's think in 2 scenarios. One scenario, we have soils in particles, which are much smaller, much lighter. And another soil, we have good aggregation. Those particles are together, so it becomes much bigger and much heavier. Which one is easy to get eroded? The one in particles, right? Because it's lighter and smaller. So if you get a water or wind effect in the field, they're going to be eroded much easier because the material there is lighter. So moving from the less intense tillage to more intense tillage, we are losing more soils from our field. Same thing with temperature and moisture, that we get regulation and different temperature and moisture set in our field. So one important thing to mention here is no-till. It has more moisture, but at the same time has more pore space available for air. How that happens? So if a soil has more moisture and more air, compared to conventional tillage, which has less moisture and less air? Does it make sense, or is it contradicted? It makes sense because no-till will create more pore space, which will have more room for storing the water, and it will also have more room to have the air and movement in the field. That's exactly what we talk when we talk about the pore space. If not, then we see these two scenarios. One, we have conventional tillage, one, we have no-till. We have a good residue there. In this scenario, we have water stress and soil physical property issues that we need to challenge. And usually, yield reduction just come after it. So how to grow soil structure, have a better soil structure, and also accumulate organic matter? We need to understand the mechanism behind this a little bit. So the system starts when a litter fall on the soils, when a plant residue or animal residue fall into the soil. Then microbes quickly find that energy source, try to decompose that material, and start developing much smaller plant residues, which are more sticky, like a glue, and which attach the soil particles together. And over the time, we will have more microbes and more soil particles coming into area and creating different size of the pores. And sometimes the size of the pores are enough small that microbes cannot go into there, but we can store organic matter in it. In those scenarios, we usually have longer standing organic matter, and if we keep having this accumulation happening in the soil, we get higher and higher organic matter level in the soils. So what tillage does, in any time during this process, or even at the end of the process, tillage will just come and physically crack this aggregate, put in part, and make that stored organic matter available for the microbes. And not all microbes are good, right? Some of them are bad. They just come and eat our organic matter and cause a disturbance there, microbial death, and we start losing organic matter, which is currently happening in coastal plain in North Carolina. So it is important to incorporate some of the management practices like cover cropping or reduced tillage or no-till, even if possible, to protect the soils and to let soils to rest and have more organic matter accumulation. So why? Because soil health and organic matter works together. If we have a better soil health, we usually see a higher organic matter. Or if we have a higher organic matter, we usually see a better organic matter with the same soil type, better soil health with the same soil type comparison. So increasing the organic matter, or what we call carbon sequestration, it means we are accumulating carbon in the soils over the time. There are many economical ways, like cover crop is probably the most economical way to do increasing the inputs in the field. We are probably familiar with those, right? And we also are familiar with decreasing the outputs, going with less minimum tillage or no-till with less intensity. But there is one part that we are still trying to understand is more about the crop soils microbiome interactions or their relationships. And this is where exactly soil health come in to increase the organic carbon in the soils. That's what we are trying to understand. So here I want to show another graph. Again, from left to right, we have increasing the intensity of the tillage. And these darker columns, the first column of each tillage is representing the surface depth. And right next to that is going deeper and deeper. Then in different tillage, again, deeper and deeper. So once you look at the more conservative tillage practices, you have much higher organic matter level or carbon level. So when you go in more intense tillage, you have less organic matter level. At the same time, surface depth and the subsurface depth organic matter levels are really close to each other. So in overall, it is lower. And at the same time, with the depths are really close to each other. We are not only losing organic matter with more intensity in the tillage, we are also mixing the soil and diluting the organic matter level with the deeper soil depths. We are basically having much less organic matter we could have in the soil. So that's another impact of the tillage for organic matter level. And for cover cropping, cover crop and tillage goes together very well for understanding. They kind of have same mechanisms, similar mechanisms and similar dynamics. Cover crops helps with improving the soil structure. It provides the living mulch. It has the living roots in the system, And when we terminate that, those roots stay in the soils and die, and they become the part of the organic matter too. And it's most economical way of moving organic matter deeper in soil profile. We have different type of the cover crops, and they can be, some of them can do good job in some regions, some may not, like crimson clover usually have hard time in tidewater, and that is also dependent on soil type and climate. So we need to get to know our soils and climate well to adapt the best tillage and cover crop managements, because they help a lot. Why they help a lot? Because they can store organic matter. They can increase soil structure or having a better structure. So we have some evidence, even deeper in profile, like you can see some roots here. There should be another one, some here. And when they die, these roots, when they die, they leave the channels, they leave the pores in the space. So you can see these two pores, these are the root channels. And they are darker than the rest of the soil. Why? Because the roots have died and become a part of the organic matter stored in the pores. Until we disturb these pores and make them available to air and microbes, that is going to stay there. So this is how the cover crop thinking is worked to increase the soil organic matter level. So again, another picture here, you probably cannot see this by your eyes. We have probably at least 10 times more number of the soil particles there than number of the people in this room. And this is one single aggregate, about 2 mm. But you cannot see these particles by yourself. Maybe sand, we can see it. Maybe some of the seals if they are bigger. But I don't think the clay particle is that much easy to see it, right? And even the pores here, they can get a small scale that we have to use kind of some sort of microscope to see that. Especially this one here is 20 microns, is impossible to see it. And you can see, it looks like a pipe, but it's a root. It's a very tiny root, aggregated a lot of particles around it, and it is supporting our soil structure. So it is very important to develop a root network in the soil to improve the soil structure. And we need to do that with different crop types. That's why cover crop is important, because we increase the diversity in the field. Why? Because the way you increase the carbon sequestration, organic matter, the most economical way, is you get storage from the crops. Basically, crops are like a factory, they work for us. So if they, as much as you have the green leaves living in your field, you will continuously have carbon sequestration in the soil. Why? Because these crops will capture the CO2 from the air, and they are going to convert that and store it in the soils through the roots, because they do make business with microbes in the soil. Microbes produce nitrogen, crops produce carbon, and they make the exchange for both of them to live, and that's how we get productivity, right? That's how we get yield. Why it is important to have different type of crops there? Because different type of crops store the organic matter in different forms. Some of them store the organic matter associated with soil texture or soil type. Some of them store the organic matter with working with microbes and associated with minerals. If you have an association of the minerals when you store the carbon, then that carbon is usually longer standing compared to the organic matter which is attached to particles only. And we have the capacity to check what form of the carbon we are storing, either associated with texture or associated with minerals in Plymouth here in North Carolina. You can also check how old organic matter in your field and how long it has been there and what is the original vegetation of that organic matter in the soil. Those are a little more expensive. I don't think we can do in North Carolina, but we may be able to do in Raleigh. So it's going to be a little expensive though. Again, going back to decision of the management practices, we need to consider this improving soil health or deciding the management practices that bring more benefit for our soils, which eventually will reflect into crop yield. So generally, we would recommend, these are very general, and depending on your soils, depending on your field, what you have there is going to change. The type is going to change, but these are 4 general things to do. Minimizing the disturbance, let your soils to rest, and have some cover crops there, increase the diversity, incorporate organic matter, and use the appropriate tillage tools. Why we say is appropriate tillage tools? For those who usually challenge with compaction, especially for hard pan, currently available technology, we only have ripping. We need to rip soil. But when we do ripping, ripping is a very addictive technique because we only open a certain space, let the water to infiltrate, but we have to repeat this activity over the time. Depending on your tillage, if you are using, let's say, conventional tillage, you may do this in every 3, 4, maybe 5 years, but if you move into longer no-till, it might go around 30, 40 years. But you have to do it because of our soil types. So we need to come up with a way to challenge this, and cover crops can do that because when they grow the roots through it, they can accumulate more carbon, they can penetrate it. But why doesn't that happen in North Carolina is because we have a softer surface soils compared to the hard pan layer. So cover crops are smart, they try to stay on the surface, they don't want to penetrate through it, right? So that's why it is really hard to go through it. Then what to do? We know the technology, smart tap, right, to avoid the quick development of the hard pan. At the same time, we can use this technology and trying to find a way to incorporate some of the organic materials at the hard pan layer. So for example, one of them we just mentioned was the biochar, basically a controlled burn charcoal which has about the 70–80% organic matter, and it has a huge pore space. We can put it there and have it physical and biologically resistant material. But this is only idea so far. We haven't tried yet, but it seems promising. And then with that, the time we are going to earn, we can grow the cover crops through it. I know I put only one cover crop here, but it's also depending on what type of cover crop you have. Should we have single cover crop or should we have a mixture? That is also being very important. So as the first step towards this goal, we put some field with soybean grain support that we are looking in different soil cover crops with different tillage practices in coastal plain and tidewater. And we get the samples from every 2 inches to up to 24 inches, trying to understand how these cover crops and tillage are being adapted in those soils. After learning this, which one is the best for that specific soil type, we're going to try that ripping technology and trying to see if we can reduce the impact of the hard pan. We also have we also currently have an understanding of what that soil is doing, but we haven't had treatments in here, but we can see the relationship between soil properties. What is driving that issue there? Is it because we have more compacted soils, so we get a nutrient deficiency, or nutrient doesn't matter with compaction, or are they related to each other, or pH is driving something there? We can also try to understand that. And soybean grain is also trying to support with new technologies we bring in. So we can have the technologies, we check how the nitrogen fixation or carbon accumulation in soils is happening at different conditions. Because sometimes we have this water table is very close to surface, we have more saturated conditions, less saturated conditions. We try to understand if that is a driving factor for nitrogen fixation. And also we are looking into very, very small scale to understand where that nitrogen is going. The fertilizer you are adding in the field, where is that going? Is it going to crop or is it going somewhere else? Is it becoming air or is it being stored in the soils for your crop to use it? How long is it standing there? So we'll try to understand those, and soybean is big support for that. So we have some fact sheets already out, some are on the way coming, but also another resource I want to introduce is Soil Health and Management Extension Portal. Please go ahead and check. We have tillage, different tillage practices, and now we are working on bedding and bedding cover crop in there. We have different tillage and cover crop management depending on what region you are. And you can also look into details of that region and what cover crops we have listed for that specific region that could have different benefits, and those benefits are there too. If you are too, I sometimes am lazy. So if you don't want to read it, you can just go ahead the page and click on this cursor that you can listen whatever is written on that page. So if you're driving and you want to listen to something, just go ahead. We have portal recorded by different people, and it's a good resource to have. Well, that's all I have, and there is more coming. We are working on these items to bring more. I can see a chat, but I don't know what that is. There's something on the chat here. That's all I have. Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Any questions? I've got a couple of questions regarding your biochar research. In the upper coastal plain, we have a lot of issues that develop in soil health in regards to cover crop because of the seasonal high water table. That biochar, as you well know, it will increase the pore spacing. Obviously, mid-season and a latter part of the season will help with that water movement, whatever is in that soil profile up into that root structure. What I'm concerned about is early spring. The reason why our cover crops aren't developing roots, and we've got 2 decades of research, is there's no oxygen there. The other thing with the biochar, that's a carbon source. Where we're deficient at in eastern North Carolina, and you may have seen this as well, we don't have biologically active carbon. That's where our deficiency is at. Now, it's going to take time, obviously, with that. Now, I like the biochar from a standpoint you're going to increase that cation exchange capacity. The only thing with that is we've got a larger reserve that we're going to have to fertilize and build some kind of fertility reserve in order to grow crops. And one of the other things we're running into with our corn and cotton rotations, we're having the least amount of beneficial fungal development in our soils. And I would like to see that biochar stimulate that as well. Because when we've got corn residue or cotton residue that's on a conservation tillage, whether it's strip till, no till, it's laying out there 2 or 3 years, that's not a good sign. And because that residue is a long chain alcohol developed plant, we've got to have a fungal community to decompose it and as well as bring that nutrient available to our planting system.
Yeah, that question have a lot of questions in it actually. So I will try to go one by one. So please remind me if I forget any parts. So the first part with cover crops, not only moisture is driving that issue with cover crop growth, there is also temperature. So it's important first to identify the timing of what type of cover crop we are going to put in the field. So after we get that understanding, because of the temperature is driving the major factor there, then we can look at in the moisture. Yes, moisture and temperature together is actually one of the major factors deciding what cover crop we should have in that region. That's exactly the same issue with crimson clover in most tight water regions, especially in the north side here, right? So much closer to northeast maybe. So that's definitely 2 factors that need to be considered. So when you put the biochar there, yes, we are putting the resistant material there, but you need to have some sort of organic matter in the soils to function better. So if you want to develop the labile organic carbon, the cover crops can do perfect job there because they just continuously store that carbon there, right? But the vegetation is becoming really important. But what you are needing in there, that's your soils need to function better, right? To soils be functioning better, organic matter is one of the main components that we need to have there. And we need to have a good resource of the organic matter stored in the stable form to support that soils in long run, so we can start developing more short-term organic matter circles there, right? So that's exactly the same thing with your savings in your bank. So you need to have a good saving or good money to start a really good company, right? So if you want to have much bigger profit or just coming from that factory, you need to have much bigger scale of the factory. To increase the scale of the soil or to increase the size of the soil capacity there is the way through the organic matter in general. But of course, you need to have a good soil physical properties, good biological activity there. But when you put your microbes into the soil, like let's say we apply something there and you don't have any organic matter, basically you don't have any energy source. How they're going to survive? They don't have food. So we first need to make sure we have a good enough amount of the food. And whatever we are putting there, let's say we don't have good amount of the food or we have a good, depending on condition, what we are adding there should be working well what we have in the scenario in the field, right? So if you don't have enough energy, let's say 0.1 or 0.2% organic matter, and you put a bunch of microbials in the soils, which is a very expensive technique, but when you do that, then how they are going to survive? And you don't have a good soil physical condition and have a lot of water standing there, how they are going to move around, how they are going to breathe. Even roots cannot breathe there. So what I am trying to say here, yes, we need to improve soil health and organic matter. Biochar probably is one of the ways. That's why I was saying it's only an idea. We're trying to do it. And it's because these things all work together. So if I tell you just do no-till, it's going to fix all of your issues, or cover crop is going to answer everything that you have concern about, that's not going to work. You have to come with because soil is a living system, it has a lot of different dynamics, so we need to come up with a technique that covers all the dimension or concerns that we have about that specific soil in that field. And sometimes even one part of the field needs to be treated different than the other part. Even for tillage, maybe we have to go with the variable depth tillage because some part may have much shallower soils or maybe have some issue that we have to go with the shallower depth of the tillage. Maybe the other part we have to go a little deeper. It is really depending on the conditions as well. Does it cover everything? Okay, just want to make sure.